Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we are going to be talking about Nevada big game applications and hunting. We've got Jordan Christensen and Jason Browning of The Draw on Instagram. They're known as We Are The Draw. Guys, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Jay?
Doing just fine. We're staring at it. Looks like April 29th. Application deadline for Nevada. We've been chopping through these different states, and you guys have done a phenomenal job breaking down and outlining these different states. So I thought I'd get you on and talk about Nevada. Should give us, today's the 8th of April, should give us listeners a good 20 days to be able to take the information that you guys are going to tell us about and be able to interpret that and put that into their own application strategy for Nevada. So let's just dive into Nevada. Before we get into that, just want to catch up with you guys, give you guys a chance to greet the listeners, tell the listeners that haven't listened to the podcast with you guys before, just a little bit about what you guys do, and then we'll go into it.
Perfect. I appreciate it, Jay. Yeah, actually, even to just start with, if you didn't mind, I was going to have a small retraction here at the beginning of this. We did a Colorado one a couple weeks ago, Jay, and I had a lapse for a second as we had gotten started and had talked about the Colorado black bear being a qualifying license when you're getting started with your applications in Colorado this last year, and mostly just wanted to apologize to guys who got in there and were planning on doing that based on what we said, and then kind of ran into a confusing moment. Obviously, it wouldn't let you do it, but still apologize to guys who had to fight through that for a minute because of a mistake on my end, but. Nevada.
Yeah, one of those things, the computer wouldn't let you move forward, so I'm sure they figured out real quickly that the bear license wasn't a qualifying license, so I appreciate you saying that. You guys have been so in-depth with all of your information to make one little minor, you basically misspoke. That's no big deal, but I appreciate you bringing that up. Have the calls and such from application for the different states, have they been coming in nice and steady, and have you guys been busy with dealing with all these different western states applications since we've done some podcasts?
Absolutely, Jay. It's fantastic. Your listeners are great. So many are very engaged guys, so a lot of them we're definitely getting some guys that are just getting started in one state or the other, but we really enjoy the conversation with your listeners because so many of them are spending time listening to your podcast. They're also going to GoHunt.com, looking at the Filtering 2.0 feature, and we definitely get into a little deeper context with some of your listeners, and we enjoy that. That's a lot of fun to start talking even theory and some of that type of stuff with your listeners. We enjoy it very much.
They seem to be better educated as a group.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jason. Both of you guys, Jordan and Jason, have an immense background in outfitting, have a background in tag applications. You apply your families and your own, selves for these different states. You guys bring an amazing amount of knowledge. I want to point out, you mentioned GoHunt.com, the Insider, the Filtering 2.0. As we've talked about before, and as the listeners are aware, GoHunt is a sponsor of this podcast, and the Insider is an amazing tool, in my opinion, the best Western hunting resource tool out there for guys wanting to break down and look at the different harvest objectives, draw odds, different animals in all the different states. But you guys write the strategy articles for GoHunt.com, for the Insider, for a bunch of the different states. And you guys as well use the Insider on a daily basis. Want to put you guys on the spot just a little bit and just talk briefly about how you use the Insider in order to look at whether it be mule deer or sheep or elk or, antlerless licenses for elk or whatever it may be, how do you use the insider in order to base your opinions and some of your, your application strategies off of that?
We use it every day here at the Draw, Jay. It's become such a vital tool for us. I can't even imagine not having it now that you have it. You don't know you're missing it till you have it, and then it would really be missed. The thing that's really effective and that I use a lot is I use those scrolls to move and change, and you can just, at your fingertip, you can look at so many, in 5 minutes, I can look at so many options in 5 minutes with the Filtering 2.0 that would have taken me hours to research and write down and figure out and mine through the data. It just really has sped up the process for us, and it gives us the ability to give our customers answers quickly when they ask us about certain things, which you just didn't really have at your fingertips prior to Go Hunt coming out with that. And the really cool factor about that program is how you can change those levels and scores and potential scores, and you just can go through the data so fast. And to me, that's what makes it really, really special.
Yeah, whether you're looking for something with 2 points, 3 points, 5 to 10. You can go point levels. You can go size of bucks. I'm looking for, 160 to 180 bucks. I'm looking for, 180 plus. There's a way to filter it all and then go, okay, there's 7 units that I need to be looking at for, 350 plus bulls, or, there's 13 units in this state that I need to be looking at for bulls between, 300 and 350. It's pretty neat how you can basically filter the whole data. I will add that if you go to gohunt.com/JScott, you can get a $50 gift card just for signing up for gohunt.com Insider. Guys, let's go ahead and dive into Nevada. We've got this April 29th deadline looming. So I'll let you take the floor and basically walk the listeners through the application process in Nevada, and then we'll then kind of take each animal, if you will, and kind of go through them briefly.
Sure. Even just kind of calling out a little bit, Jay, what we do and what our business is very much, the reality is we're very much a convenience type service. The act of actually going on to a state website and applying for a permit isn't so much of a daunting task nowadays, and maybe more so in Nevada with the map system that they use to help you identify exactly what unit, what weapon, what season dates, all of that is really quite an amazing feature that they have on Nevada's website. And so, as it gets down to actually applying, this is so much more of a convenient service that that we do for our clients, guys who don't have enough time to manage through lots of different deadlines, manage through lots of different times of research and type of stuff like that. All of that's so available with Go Hunt. It really just is a matter of if guys don't have the time or don't want to take the time because they're doing what they do every day, that's where we can really fill a void and manage through a lot of that. And Nevada, like I say, is probably one of the most user-friendly application websites that I've found. Jumping into what Nevada is and how it works and how that draw process works. So this is very much a pure bonus point state, Jay, with meaning that there is no max point pool. Everybody's got essentially a raffle ticket in the bucket. And what Nevada has done is they square your points every year so that you're getting more presence in the draw every time that you apply. So with 1 year, you have 1 ticket in the bucket. By the time you get to year 10, you have 100 tickets in the bucket because you have 10 points that they've squared plus 1 for that year. So you have 101 chances at any particular. Now, that being said, personal opinion, Nevada's tough, Jay. Nevada is definitely a state that when I'm looking at all of the applications across the country, this is kind of my long shot. This is almost a unicorn tag, so to speak, for most of the species in that state. It's very difficult for a non-resident to draw in Nevada. That being said, to not have it part of your application strategy each year is probably a mistake for guys who are looking for above average. The management strategy in so many of the species, all of the species really in Nevada, seems to be better than or above what a lot of the other western states. So even for how hard it is to draw and the time and the money that you're putting in for it, when that day comes, it will arguably be one of the very best chances you have at an above average representation of whatever species you're going after. So it's not for everybody, but Nevada, for guys looking for above average animals, is definitely something that they need to get involved in.
So from a trophy quality standpoint, it's once you draw a tag, it can be a very, very good state. And would you put it up there with any of the states or above any of the states as far as quality across the board?
You know, for me, I think we've even said this in the past, like top-end quality for deer and elk, we'll just kind of even focus on that. You know, it's hard to argue Colorado for deer, Utah for deer and elk, Nevada for deer and elk, and Arizona for deer and elk. Those tend to be kind of our top contenders year in and year out. And I don't know where I would necessarily rank it in that group. For the deer, you know, at a minimum, their management strategy is probably second only to Colorado. The statewide objective is $30 per 100 does, and so just inherently, that's going to give a guy a better chance at some age class in pretty much anywhere he's going. So by default, you go to even a mid-tier unit in Nevada, and outside of maybe some places you've been in Colorado, or if you've been lucky and drawn some elite permit in some of these other western states, a mid-tier unit in Nevada is going to, you know, give you a heck of an opportunity to do something better than average for sure.
Right on. And I assume that Nevada is online only, or do they also allow paper applications?
You know, yeah, 2 years ago was the last time that they did paper applications, so we're moving into 2 years now that they have not done it. The one thing that the listeners need to know of, especially if Nevada this is kind of a year one possibly for Nevada, is that this is one of the only western states that actually requires a photo of their hunter's education card on file prior to applying. So I believe the cutoff, I won't throw a date out there. I want to say it's like in the 1960, possibly 1960 is the cutoff. If you were born before that, you're in good shape. If you were born after that, then you need to be prepared to send a photocopy of your hunter's education, which for some guys that is easier said than done. I believe you can also send, if you have a state license from another state that's showing the hunter's education number on there, that too will be a qualifier. But where we've got a few weeks before the deadline, if you're planning on Nevada, absolutely do not wait on this state towards the deadline. At least get that piece of the puzzle taken care of as quickly as you can, because they're going to get inundated with a lot of folks right at the very end, and it's probably not going to happen if you haven't done it at least a week or two out.
Okay, good to know. Why don't you just dive in and go through the whole process, and then, you know, just take the floor.
Sure. So with Nevada, it's really one of the most, I don't even know what the word is you'd put on it. They're very giving when it is your turn to draw, essentially. And what that means is so many states have one, maybe two choices that are looked at prior to moving to the next applicant. But if your name finally gets pulled in Nevada, they're going to look at 5 different selections prior to moving to the next applicant. And so it gives the guy a lot of different opportunities to have a lot of strategy around what their real goal is and what they're trying to accomplish in Nevada on any given species. You know, historically, or more often than not, with 5 choices, a guy has the opportunity that may be different than any other state, where he can always, without question, swing for the fence on what he believes to be the best hunt or two, depending on weapon, depending on season dates, whatever it is that he feels like would be his or her dream hunt. To not put that as your first or second choice is a mistake. And now, depending on what your goals are, you may run through the other three selections with similar type goals in mind, looking for just the very top end, top tier kind of units for any given species. Or if the idea is let's go hunting as often as we can and let's see if we can get lucky, let's get some value out of the money that we're spending to Nevada, then it gives us a chance to even put up to three kind of better odds, chase the odds type of situations, and where we know that there's not a finish line ever for any applicant. There's no way to ever be at 100% chance of drawing outside of possibly, I guess, a unit or a hunt that's been historically undersubscribed. Then this allows us to be aggressive, meanwhile never selling ourselves short, because if by some miracle we come out really early on any given species, by all means, let's go to the very best Nevada has to offer based on what your goals are. So that's a huge opportunity, and it allows for a lot of twists and turns on what guys' actual agenda is and what they're trying to accomplish. That's the other thing I'll throw in there in why guys kind of come and go or maybe don't get started in Nevada is that $155 hunting license up front seems a little daunting. Once you've bought that, it's definitely very affordable to get the most out of that by applying for as many species of interest. So we get 2 chances to draw sheep, both an application specific to California Bighorns and another one specific to desert bighorns. Then we can do deer and elk and antelope. So if we're a resident of Nevada, then they also have the Rocky Mountain Bighorns. So 3 different sheep chances as well as the mountain goat. It's been a few years since we've seen a mountain goat end up in the non-resident pool. And honestly, Jay, I'm not sure. I don't even think there ever has been a Rocky tag given to, maybe there has, to non-residents, but it's been quite some time. So once you're in, you've bought the $155 hunting license, they're going to add a $1 fee at the end of your transaction, so it ends up actually being $156. But as hard as it is to draw, you might as well be putting in for everything and see which one you can get lucky at, for sure.
Right on. How are conditions? What are you hearing about Nevada before we dive into the rest of the application stuff? What are you hearing about conditions for this coming year? Is it much like all over the West that we've been talking about, all of the great moisture conditions that we've been seeing?
It really is, Jay. It's been pretty exciting. The bulk of the state has really been under a lot of drought conditions, which kind of interestingly enough, they're kind of blaming the drought conditions and the fires that have been happening in Nevada the last couple of years, a little bit on the decline of the overall mule deer population. Meanwhile, it's been kind of increasing the antelope habitat, and you're definitely seeing some better than average stuff happening for the antelope. Overall, year over year, I mean, we're at only about 30% of the state is considered, actually even just a little less than 30% is considered abnormally dry. Meanwhile, it's showing on the the drought.gov, the drought tracker that the government has out there, that only about 3.6% of the whole state is even in any level of drought. Like, say, almost 30%, maybe a little abnormally dry, but only 3%, 3.6% is showing actual drought conditions. The real crazy one is when you start looking at the snow depth analysis and even comparing 2018 to 2019. So in the Go Hunt strategy article that's up on gohunt.com right now, there's a head-to-head showing the difference between early March in 2019 versus early March 2018 and late March 2019, and it's amazing, Jay. Like, there is so little snow at all in the entire state of Nevada last year, early March, and by the end of March this year, there are few places that have over 8,000 feet of elevation that don't have good snowpack. I mean, you've even got some of the mountains clear down by Las Vegas that are still holding on to snowpack, let alone you get, really anywhere else in the state from over by Reno to above Winnemucca, the whole northern above Elko and Wendover and all the Jarbidge and all that, just like extensive amounts of snow. And the crazy thing about Nevada is I'm sure that there are areas that have some sort of winter kill occasionally and whatnot, but being that just those mountains, it seems like come out of nowhere, those deer often have somewhere, the elk too, to go. Always. Like there's another level of elevation they can drop down to. So you don't see as much of that in Nevada in most of the state as you do in other western states. And where some of these other states are really nervous right now about if they continue to get any severe cold fronts, we could be in real trouble. Nevada, every time we see conditions like this, it's just a home run. Like, you're not going to have any major winter kills very often in that state, and all you did is just fill up reservoirs, soak the ground, and 2019, just like in Arizona and New Mexico, should be an absolute banner year to have either an elk or a deer tag in your pocket.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing all the pictures of all the lucky draw recipients of tags. Let's just dive into each individual animal right now and go through them.
Sure. So I guess we'll probably start with desert. I find, Jay, that more often than not, when I'm getting started with a guy in Nevada, it's because of desert bighorns. Primarily, that's going to be the number one kind of tipping point for a guy to say, yes, I want to get started in Nevada. And the reason for that is, for a number of years now, Nevada's offering over 30 desert bighorn permits to non-residents, and typically it's been 5 California bighorn permits, but with some changes that we're seeing this year, it's even going to be higher than that. And so with over 30 desert bighorn permits available, that's more than every other state offering a desert bighorn combined. Right. And so if that's a high priority species for a guy, to not have your name in the hat, to not have 5 different units you're being selected for, it's really something that a guy should really consider. And for non-residents, it's a little bit of kind of a concept we talk a lot of here at the Draw about, which is equal odds or good odds. The unfortunate reality, Jay, is that Nevada has such a mature point system. I think like max points this year is clear up to 26 for non-residents on most of the species. So we've got a mature point system, and where they're squaring the number of points, a net new user is going to have a less than 1% chance of drawing a sheep tag, and crazy enough, guys with 20 points are probably going to have less than 1% chance. And so in the big picture, it's very similar to equal odds. It's not exactly equal odds. It's not in Idaho. It's not in New Mexico. But for all intents and purposes, you got your name in a bucket, and it's anybody's game because there is a lot of tickets in each of those buckets. And so it gives you a chance for sure. And so that's kind of a starting point. Again, kind of back to that concept. If we're going to start with anything, we might as well be getting the most value out of that hunting license and applying for more species. So kind of staying on track with deserts, a couple of things that have happened this year that are exciting for non-residents is there's 2 new hunt selections. Overall, this will have very little effect, but some positive effect. It's going to spread out the applicants just a little bit more. Both units or hunts, I guess you could say, that are now available to non-residents have been hunted previously for years by the residents. It's just that there's enough in there now that they're offering it to the non-residents. So units 045 and 153, that's one hunt code. 150 to 160 class rams, but overall this could, as the smoke clears, kind of become one of these units that gets overlooked. They're not killing a whole lot of big rams in there. There are some areas that are awfully physical where, and it could be one of these ones where if you don't care exactly how big of a sheep you're going to be hunting, you just want to see a sheep tag in your pocket, time will tell, but this could be a new one kind of on the bottom of the list in Nevada. And then they did an early hunter. They split 161.
Okay, 161, and what kind of quality in there?
160 plus rams typically. I think that we're going to see probably now that they're splitting that, and there's going to be a few more opportunities and a few things like that. The age class we could see a little top end get knocked off in 161, but overall that unit historically has produced quite well, so I don't think that's going to be a major issue in 161. And then across the board, there's new dates on 9 different hunts, which are kind of, the state of Nevada is pretty notorious for this. If they have success rates that they think that they can positively affect by shifting dates around, then they'll do it. It's kind of different. You don't see that very often in Western states, and I think they took a hard look at a lot of different units that maybe don't have as high a success rates as they wanted, and either extended those dates or shifted them slightly. And I think that's just that's coming into play again this year with 9 different season dates, even on hunts that have existed for a while.
With 30 deserts being offered to non-residents, the guy out there that's listening that literally has never applied in the state of Nevada before, I mean, does he have a chance mathematically? Does he actually have a chance to draw a tag in the state of Nevada? Yeah,
he does, Jay. I mean,
obviously we've talked about not great odds.
Yeah, you could buy a Powerball ticket. The stars have aligned. I mean, I'd be it would be shocking because the odds are quite low. I mean, we're talking about probably a 0.001% chance. But that's the beauty of it. Even these guys who've been in 10 or 12 years are still at we're talking decimal point kind of odds. And so, yes, mathematically, the numbers are a little hard to look at when we really break it down. But overall, if I've got 1% or less and the guy next to me has been doing it 10 or 15, 20 years and he has less than 1%, I mean, I kind of feel like I'm in the running. I know I'm in the running. So
you're saying there's a chance.
There is a chance, yeah. And the volume of tags and the amount of units is really kind of this perfect storm where it makes sense for guys who are interested in that species to not be applying for Nevada is a tough one, right? Let alone, another thing we haven't talked about much, Jay, or at all yet, is the silver state option. So it's even one more, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's probably very similar odds, but once you're in there, you're applying for those, you're going to have the option to check a box for the silver state tags. It's $20. It's one, I mean, when we're trying to draw a desert, it's all about, it's not about any individual odds. It's about how many names, how many buckets can I get my name in, and who knows where your name's going to come out. But get your name in as many different buckets as you can. And Nevada, for a non-resident, it's pretty amazing because you have the actual draw, 2 different species. You got the silver state with 2 different species, and then you even have later the dream tags, which again 2 different species in there. So 6 different buckets that you can have your name in, and it's because they're doing a lot of good for sheep populations. Nevada kind of is a standout on how many offerings. I mean, they're scheduled to have over 280 total sheep tags available for 2019 in that state between the 3 different species. So it's a huge opportunity for non-residents. It's unreal. It's unreal. This day and age, it's unbelievable that there's that much going on in Nevada in that species.
So, Jordan, if you were going to take, say the top 2 to top 5 units as far as quality, what would they be? And then the converse of that, if you were going to say, if you've already mentioned too that, if quality necessarily, size of ram isn't the biggest concern, is there, 2, 3, 4, 5 units that you would say, you might consider these?
Probably I would want to focus mostly around Las Vegas and that very southern end of Nevada. Historically, that's always going to, those mountains are brutal, they're deep, they're big, and they just lend themselves to age class. So, if I'm going to put a number on it, like 262 Spring Mountain, 263 Highland, 267 Black Mountain, 268 Muddy Mountains, all of those down in the south end. I mean, there's going to be big rams out of really every one of those units, or potentially out of every one of those units in and around Las Vegas, Lake Mead, and even drifting a little bit further north in like the 280, 280, 281, 282, and 283. It's just, you've got great genetics, good populations, and a pretty legitimate chance at a 170-plus ram. As far as sleepers go, like I say, if guys take a hard look at what 45 and 153 is, I think there's a chance that could end up with a little better odds. Others are going to be, 44 and 182 up by Winnemucca. It's that big unit south of Winnemucca, south of I-80 right there. I think that's a pretty good unit for guys. Like, finding something outside of what everyone, like, sheep is so dissected, right? Like, there's so many guys every year that are trying to beat each other and be smarter than each other. Like, really the only time you can find, quote unquote, a hidden gem, Jay, in my opinion, is either a low sheep density or extremely physical, or both, right? And so you're going to be giving up something, or you're taking on a task that others didn't want to, because it's still such a high demand species. I find another thing to think about and might help is, historically around Tonopah, the 212, 213, they've got early and late on those right now. Strategy-wise, inherently, if a guy's looking at those units, he's probably going to be looking at the unit as a whole, and he's going to pick the early and the late as a default, right? He's going to put both of those selections in his line of 5. Well, you would imagine that those tags on the early are going to inherently be gone prior to the late ones, because if everyone's putting first and second choice early and late on those types of units, then the early season will be gone first. So if a guy's trying to get a little tiny edge on something, then only applying for late leaves more opportunity to apply for some other quote-unquote sleepers or better odds types units, because he's avoiding the fact that so many guys are going to just look at the unit and then apply early and late, where the late is really where the opportunity probably is more often than not on those, as far as just having a little bit better edge.
Gotcha. Let's talk a little bit. Let's move to California Bighorn.
Sure. California is, this is another super success story going on in Nevada, up in the northwest corner of the state, Jay. I mean, for the first time in a long time, maybe ever in California, applicants are going to actually have to choose to leave one of the opportunities out, one of the selections. For a long time, it's just, there's been 4 of them, and put all 4 on your application and see what happens. This is one of the hardest sheep tags probably in the country to draw, for residents or non-residents. 20+ years, you were not even getting to a 1% chance. But once we bought that hunting license for an extra $14, what if, right? And so as we look at it, 51 is a new selection this year, Jay. This is one of the new selections that they've allowed us, the non-residents, to apply for. Overall, there isn't a very good sheep density in 51 comparing it to like 35 or 34 or any of that. But they have killed a 170-plus ram 2 years in a row out of 51, which is a massive I mean, that is a tank of a California. So if a guy, you know, is willing to know that you're just not going to see a lot of sheep and all of that, but you want to swing for the fence, you know, 51 probably ought to be one of your top picks up there. Over a long period of time, 12 is probably on the bottom end of all of that. I think you're going to see a lot less applicants in 12 this year as they shift over and are leaving that one out of the mix. So you would imagine that's probably going to create the opportunity to have at least the least number of applicants applying for 12. Overall, they don't produce very big rams in Unit 12, and there's a very, you know, it's just not a, historically, it's not a great hunt for a big ram, but if you're like me, like, I don't care. Like, I just got to have it.
You just want a ram.
Yeah, I got to have it. So, you know, if
I got that from the Colorado podcast we did. I just want a ram tag in my pocket. Okay, and I know that the California Bighorn are not available to the California Bighorn are available to non-residents, but the Rocky Mountain Bighorn are not available to non-residents. If you were speaking to some of the residents that were looking at Rocky, what would you tell them?
You know, what an exciting year, Jay. Like, I mean, not only are we seeing some more opportunity for the non-residents in both the California and the desert, but to see them open up, you know, 91 and 74 this year and offer what's probably going to equate to one tag in each of those units is pretty darn exciting. I think that we're on the very front end of what these two units could turn into, and it's exciting for them to realize that there's some Class 4 rams that probably need to be taken out of those herds, and whether this lasts a long time, hopefully it does, or not, to allow hunters to go in there and be a part of the conservation and be a part of the management strategy is a home run. And just like for non-residents this year, the residents are going to have a few more options to put on their application. And as a resident, like, to not be taking advantage of that for a few bucks, to have your name in that hat, I mean, what if? You know, as far as trophy quality and whatnot, the rumors on the street right now are 74 is going to produce a pretty darn big ram. I don't know if anyone's feeling quite the same in 91. 91, it's a little easier to get a beat on because you've got the Newfoundland Mountains there in Utah, semi-close. You got to think that, I guess those are Californias there. I'm probably about to make another blunder on your podcast here, but 91 doesn't have his story of you know, having big rams. 114 and 115 are by far the highest populations in the state. That's the units that have been hunted for a long time. You know, if you're up for a super low sheep density and a chance that it may be an above average Nevada Rocky, 74 is probably worth considering. If you're more interested in just you know, a quality hunt, you know, we kind of probably got to go back to 114 and 115 as our go-tos. There's just a lot higher sheep population in those units than the other two.
Okay, guys, before we jump into the other animals, I want to take just a second to thank the sponsors of the podcast. You obviously heard me talking before about the Go Hunt Insider. If you go to gohunt.com/jscott, you can sign up for the Go Hunt Insider. You're going to automatically get a $50 Go Hunt Gear Shop gift card just for signing up. I want to thank them for their sponsorship. I also want to thank GoHunt.com Optics Department. Cody Nelson, my friend of 20-plus years, is the optics manager. I call him the glassing guru. I've done a number of podcasts with him talking about optics, talking about glassing. If you have any optical needs at all, whether it's binoculars, spotting scopes, tripods, rifle scopes, give him a call at 702-847-8747. That's extension 2. You can also send him an email directly. That's optics@gohunt.com. I also want to thank Kuiu.com for their sponsorship. KUIU Ultralight Hunting. You can find out more about them at KUIU.com, KUIU.com. That is the ultralight hunting gear that I wear on all of my hunts. I want to thank Canyon Coolers, based right out of Flagstaff, Arizona. Go to canyoncoolers.com. If you use the JScott19 promo code, you're going to get a 10% discount. I also want to thank phonescope.com. That's the digiscoping device that I use for all of the photos and videos that you see on my Instagram page. If you use the JScott19 promo code at phonescope.com, you're going to get a 10% discount. And last but not least, onxmaps.com. If you use the JScott19 promo code, you're going to get a 20% discount there at onxmaps.com. Onyx is the app that I use on my phone on all the hunts that I go on, whether I'm at the OT6 ranch, whether I'm guiding in Mexico, turkey hunting, you name it, sheep hunting. I use Onyx Maps all the time. So I want to thank the sponsors of the podcast. Jordan and Jason, let's dive into, we've talked about sheep. Let's go ahead and dive into mule deer in the state of Nevada. And one thing that's so cool about Nevada is it constantly is kicking out great mule deer bucks, and they've got some great opportunity there. So let's talk a little bit about the mule deer hunting in the state of Nevada.
Sure. So kind of what we, one of the things I'll bring back up, Jay, is that the overall management strategy in Nevada is to have 30 bucks per 100 does. And so, there's definitely some units that aren't living up to that. There's actually 8 units that are managed for 35 bucks per 100 does. But overall, the whole state is trying to get to that. And they're not doing it in every single unit, but that's where their mindset's at, and they are, there and beyond that in some of these different units. So as mule deer goes, it's the one species, Jay, that you can actually have a party application on. I would recommend against that very strongly for the most part, outside of maybe some of the archery stuff that's a little easier to draw in a few portions of the state, but it's the one place that we can actually have a buddy on the same application as us. The other thing I'd probably like to say too, Jay, is, one of the concepts we talk about here when we're dealing with guys in Nevada is, that guided pool, and I know you did some stuff earlier on that, but I just wanted to bring that up a little bit. Like, if you know that you're going to be guided in Nevada, then to not be taking advantage of the of that guided pool draw is a mistake. And so we line guys up as soon as they're ready to. We're going to be making introductions and getting them pointed in the right direction, because you should. There are some of the very best tags in the state that are gone from the draw prior to even this normal draw happening with that guide pool and the way that it works there. So for any of your listeners, at least the guys we're talking to, if we know that that's going to be the end result, we should be taking advantage of that in years to come, especially once you get a few points under your belt, right?
For sure.
That being said, if we know we're not going guided or we've missed that guide deadline, it's a little earlier, whatever it is, similar concept. We have 5 different selections, and depending on what your goals are, we're going to at least want to swing for the fence on what we believe to be some of the very best stuff in the state, and then maybe chase the odds a little bit more on as we move forward into selection 3, 4, and 5. And so, for me, Jay, some of the standout, say, top picks in Nevada are probably going to be a lot of the stuff around Pioche, the 241 to 245, the late rifle on 221, 223, that 131, 134 late. I mean, there's been some phenomenal deer coming off of that one. Something that isn't necessarily hard to draw, or is still rather hard to draw, but I think it kind of flies under the radar a little bit, Jay, is that Unit 81 muzzleloader. The season dates on that are spectacular, like November 21 through early December, there are some big deer coming out of that unit that time of year. And then the late stuff kind of up through the Jarbridge, 071 through 79 and 91. Again, these are kind of the top end if we're looking for that 180 plus deer and a chance at something even more spectacular. For me, that's definitely kind of the go-to units. Historically, they're producing that kind of deer, and that northeast corner is maybe coming on a little bit more even than in years past. It's been pretty special. A few real special deer have come out of there lately. As far as guys that are just wanting to go hunting, I think Nevada is a tough state to do that in. It's not one that we get a ton of opportunity earlier than late, but we definitely have a few. And if we look as far from, further from the rut, primitive weapons, all of those types of things to find those opportunities, those August 10th through September 9th archery hunts, Unit 203, as well as a group of units around Eureka and headed up towards Battle Mountain in kind of the center of the state. With 1 point, Jay, you've got about a 25% or a better than 25% chance at drawing either of those. So 1 in 4 odds aren't horrible at all. It definitely gets better and better as we start getting into 2 or 3 points. I mean, we get up into that 50% chance, and there ends up being a number of different hunt selections. And those archery hunts particularly, most of them, not all of them, but most of them are kind of regions of units that we could end up drawing. But very few applicants are looking at that. Some of these, like Unit 183, I think that's Unit 251, 183, 184. There was one applicant last year, right? One guy put in for those archery permits. So I mean, these are that 251 on average. There's about a 170%, 170 class trophy potential in that area. Almost a little over 40% of the bucks that were killed were 4 point or better, and we've got very close to 100% public land in those parts of the state. So overall, we're not going to see a ton of deer. We're in parts of the state that just don't have a high deer density, but we've got a good buck to doe management agenda that the state has, a decent trophy potential, and with a couple of points, we can go hunting in Nevada a lot more often than we typically think, as long as we're willing to kind of go on those less than premier type of hunts. If we just want to go deer hunting, and it's a little bit like we talked about in Colorado. Like inherently, because of what the state of Nevada is doing and their management and all these things we've talked about, you're going to probably have a pretty positive experience on any of these units. Like so many states don't even have near the kind of buck to doe management agenda as Nevada does, and so it just lends itself to a pretty positive hunting experience, not overcrowded with people very often, and a chance at a big deer. So, deer's got to be on. This would probably be the only other species that most guys are getting started in Nevada for. It's oftentimes the deer or the desert bighorn. But if we're going to do one or the other, we ought to do all of them.
For sure. Let's dive into the elk.
Sure. So, elk is pretty special in Nevada. It used to be one of the most expensive permits at $1,200 a year, but nowadays with so many of these other states kind of catching up, it's really not that much outside of what a number of these states are charging for their elk permit. There is no party applications for elk, and again, a pretty strict bull to cow ratio management. I don't have that number right off the top of my head like I do the mule deer one, Jay, but I know it's high, and you have a lot of the state right now is above objective, or a number of units are above objective in the total number of elk that the unit has this year. And so we're expecting to kind of see maybe either or staying with what they did last year, or maybe even some increase in a few of these places, and definitely in some of the antlerless stuff we're probably going to see some additional tags being offered. But if a guy's wanting to look for the very best in Nevada, typically I'm going to probably pick 111 through 115, which I don't think is that far out of what a lot of guys are going to be saying. But 221 to 223, 231, all three of those probably, Jay, are pretty top shelf elk hunts a chance. Now this last year, the poor guys who had the tag, I think that there was a struggle. That was it was brutal. I mean,
miserable.
Though I know guys who spent some extensive amount of time in those units looking for, something above average, and it was tough to find even 350 plus in those units this year. But it kind of lends itself to why we think this coming year is going to be so good. I think a lot of those bulls were either broken or stunted or whatever it was, or both. And we're going to have an age class on the mountain that we haven't seen in a long time on a lot of units in Nevada, but particularly, those units historically have produced so well. Guys were passing bulls that on another unit might have been a shooter, and they wanted something better because of what the history is on those units, and it just didn't happen. So this year could be absolutely incredible for the caliber of bulls. As far as some sleepers and stuff maybe flying under the radar a little bit, I'm kind of a fan of 161. The bull to cow ratio is 55 bulls to 100 cows. 70+% of the bulls last year that were killed had 6 points or better on one side. I mean, I know that that's not a super high population of animals, and that's why that bull to cow ratio is slightly deceiving. But overall, if you're seeing elk, you're going to see bulls, and with a pretty good success rate and a high number of bulls being 6 point or better, that's a fantastic one. And then the other one is probably with the units 62 through 64, 66 through 68 up in the very northern part of the state, Jay. I mean, with 5 points, a guy's in the 99% chance of drawing for an archery tag, and with 10 points, you're at 52% chance with the muzzy and 39% chance with 10 points for the rifle. Again, probably not a super high density of elk that are living up in those parts of the state, but overall, between all of those units, considerable amount of public land, and, bull for bull coming out of there probably isn't all that exciting, but there are enough guys the last couple of years that are shooting just some absolute giants out of that part of the state for how good the drawing odds are at a fairly low point total. That's definitely something to consider for a guy that's willing to kind of know what he's getting into. We're not going to see a lot of animals per day, but there is a chance at something special up there for sure.
Good stuff. Let's dive into antelope.
Sure. Talk about a conservation success story. I think Nevada is probably really, that's one thing to probably call out, Jay, where that antelope herd was even, 20, 30 years ago to where it is today has been pretty amazing. I think Nevada Department of Wildlife has really pushed hard for that, and to the extent that you even have a couple of these units that they're doing captures and relocations, not only into different parts of Nevada, but also even into other western states. So kind of kudos to them for all of the work they've done, because it's really paying off. A lot of 15-inch antelope, like when you do your harvest reports in Nevada for and you've been successful, that's going to be one of the questions that they ask you, and so it's one of the data fields that you can research and look at. And the number of buck antelope with 15 inches or better last year was 30%. 30% of all the bucks that were killed had over 15 inches on one side or the other. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the Boone and Crockett antelope. That doesn't mean, there's a lot more scores than just the length for an antelope. But if you're looking for a classic, nice, solid antelope, again, it's Nevada, so it's a little bit more difficult to draw. There isn't a ton of tags available. But when the day comes, you're not just going for a run-of-the-mill antelope hunt on a lot of the different units. You've got a chance at something special happening for sure. As far as, top picks, 33's always kind of stood out as probably above average. That's kind of been the long for a number of years. That's been one of the top picks. But really, any of that stuff up in the northeast corner, the northwest corner is really is producing well. And then as soon as you get down towards the Humboldts and some of the more established populations you've got in 161, 162, even those units are producing some real nice antelope for sure.
I want to bounce back to something that you had said just to make sure. You had mentioned the Silver State tag and wanted to clarify, is the Silver State tag offered for mule deer, elk, and sheep, or is that just for sheep?
Sorry, yeah, it is actually. So it's offered for, I don't believe there is one for the Rocky or the mountain goat. But for there is a specific one for the California bighorn, a specific one for the desert bighorn, one for the elk, one for the deer, and one for the antelope. Okay, and so in order to buy a Silver State tag, do you also have to apply in the state of Nevada? So in other words, it's an added bonus to allow someone to put in for Silver State, or can you do Silver State without even applying in the general draw? You know what? That's a good question, Jay. I tell you what, so many of the guys we work with, it's an type situation. But as far as whether that's possible without it or not, I don't know that one off the top of my head.
The Silver State tag is in essence like a governor's tag, right? I mean, it's like the Arizona Super Big Game or Big Game Super Raffle, where you have basically a whole year or a long period of time, let's say, to hunt that specific animal, and it's basically like a governor's tag. You can go and hunt a bunch of different units, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. It's not. I don't think it's quite as open as the Dream Tag is. I want to say, and God, I'm gonna make another blunder on a Jay Scott podcast. I think
if you don't know exactly off the top of your head, that's fine.
I think one of the things is you are required to hunt established season dates in whatever unit you want to, but you still have to be in established season dates with the Silver State tag versus the Dream Tag. It's exactly like a governor's tag.
Okay, makes sense. From you guys' own personal application strategy, how do you approach Nevada as far as your own strategy?
Sure.
Whether it be for whatever animal.
At this point, Jay, for me, and with the uncertainty around it, because there is no max point or anything like that, right now, everything I'm doing in Nevada is trying to draw the very best that exists for the deer and the elk and the antelope. Like all 5 of my selections, I know that they're horrible odds, but I'm trying to draw something very special when the day comes for Nevada, because I have so much going on in so many of these other states. Meanwhile, like say on the California Bighorns, I'm going to have Unit 12 in there because I think there'll be less people applying for it. And then the deserts, I'm looking for the very best odds that I can on all 5 selections. I mean, same as I do pretty much everywhere right now. It doesn't matter how hard or physical or the low success rates. I'm just applying for hopefully what everybody else doesn't want.
And I do it.
What about you, Jason?
I do it a little different than Jordan. Jordan always preaches having the best chance to draw on those sheep tags. My strategy is like his on elk, deer, and antelope. I'm applying for the best units, even including sheep. I don't search out that little tiny bit of odds. If I draw the tag, I want it to be a great tag. If I'm lucky enough, I believe I'm lucky enough to be the first one out of the hat. So I want to have the best hunt in the state.
Yeah, I kind of fall in that application strategy across the board in the West, and wanting, if I'm going to get a tag, I want it to be a really good tag. And, you know, but the reality is we should probably, all of us, take Jordan's strategy of the sheep, because the odds are so against us of drawing that the reality is you up your odds even when you're looking at, you know, less than 1% chance of draw odds for sheep. The reality is a lot more of us should probably be, you know, trying to just get those sheep tags. So I see both sides of it for sure. Guys, obviously leave you a chance to, you know, if we missed anything or what have you, but also want to double back and talk a little bit about the draw, and as a company, what you guys, you know, what your everyday focus is in talking with customers, and strategy of your company and goals working with clients on a day-to-day basis. Basically double back to that and talk a little bit about your business. I know it's ever growing every day. So, you know, what do you guys think on an everyday basis? What you guys are doing, talking to clients, like what does an everyday deal, you know, encompass for you at the draw?
So our everyday goal, Jay, is to get guys hunting. And what we want to do is we want to sit down with people, and our clients, they hear this day in and day out, is we want to know what their goals are, and then we want to help them achieve those goals. If their goals are to hunt every year, then we go across the nation and we put together a hunt plan that gets them in the field every year. And we can do that. We can get them on hunts every year. If guys want to hunt, like myself personally, I want to hunt 1% top shelf. We have a plan built around those guys too. And so our main focus at the draw is to get guys hunting as often as we can on the type of hunts they want to be on. So we're really just based around a service. We have a very strong service. We really, customer service is really pushed here at the draw. We really try and make sure that people that are working with us have every I dotted and T crossed, and we take good care of our customers, and we just want to help our clients achieve their hunting goals, whatever they are.
And not to be misunderstood with, you want people to draw because you're going to get paid more. You want them to draw and get tags so they can have the enjoyment of hunting. You don't get paid any more or any less if they draw or don't draw. Talk a little bit about that so that people know that, you know, you come from a standpoint of you want to get, when you say you want to get them hunting and in the field, that's when you know that they're the happiest, rather than we want them to draw because you get some extra pay scale.
Yeah, absolutely, Jay. I mean, how we our fees are structured are a per application fee structure. So a successful or an unsuccessful result in a draw isn't affecting any of the pricing that the client's going to see when they're working with us. It's very much based on, you know, just the number of applications. And then we're the only company that we're aware of in the country that offers two types of customer experiences when you're working with us. And essentially, once we build a hunt plan around what the client's goals are, then you're going to end up with this hunt plan as well, which is a very detailed outline of what we're doing and why we're doing it and what we expect around each of those applications. And then you end up with two types of invoices, essentially. One is a non-floated, which is simple. It's we use the customer's credit card during the application process. We have it on file, and they see one charge up front for the number of applications that we're processing at $45 an application. And then moving forward, they see subsequent charges through the application season from the state websites as we're processing those through. Or they can opt into what we call our floated program, which becomes like a one-time charge out per year for that customer, so that all the state fees, app fees, our service fees, and even maybe as importantly or more is if we're dealing with states like New Mexico or the sheep, moose, and goat in Idaho that's coming up here, then we actually have a fee around putting up the money up front for the customer so that they're never out of pocket the thousands of dollars that it can take to get their name in a lot of different hats. So between that and then our Kids Apply Free program, which essentially if we whatever service, floated or non-floated, the adult chooses to use, then we can have any child that they would like in their family enrolled in our program, and it costs them $0 to have a similar program as their parents.
That's awesome. That's really cool that you guys do that. You guys are always such a wealth of knowledge, and you do such a great job. Want to give you the floor to see if there's anything that you feel like we missed on Nevada, anything you want to cover. Make sure you let the guys know how they can reach out to you. Give you each a chance to do that.
Sure. We appreciate it, Jay. Your listeners are fantastic. Like I say, we really enjoy, it seems like we get into a little bit deeper conversations with them when they call in, and we enjoy that a lot. So if there's any others out there that just have a one-off question or want to dive into some theory and some of that type of stuff, you can reach us at 575-222-1234. Definitely encourage any of them to look us up on Instagram. Our handle there is @WeAreTheDraw. We're on Facebook as well and YouTube, but probably @WeAreTheDraw on Instagram is the one we're most engaged with. So call us, look us up, send us a message, whatever it is.
And then your website as well. What's your website, Jordan?
It is wearethedraw.com.
Okay. Great stuff. Well, guys, probably the next time I'll talk to you, I'll have hopefully about 75 more Gould's turkeys under my belt and have completed a bunch more Royal and World Slams with clients. And we'll be kind of mid-May, and we'll be needing to talk about Arizona. I heard you mention about Idaho. I'm not sure when that deadline is. Do you happen to know that off the top of your head?
April 30th.
Okay, April 30th, so probably not going to get a podcast in on Idaho, but if anybody out there is listening, give the guys a call and you can chat Idaho. Probably the next time I'll talk to you, we'll be discussing sheep and deer in the state of Arizona, my home state. And always great having you guys on. I appreciate the willingness to come on and share with the listeners. I feel like you give a lot, and that's the business you're in, and it's always appreciated to feel like you guys are giving all of that information out there, as well as you get paid for that, and you're not holding anything back. So, guys, God bless you, and thanks for coming on and sharing with us.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate it, Jay. Thank you.
All right, take care.